Hi and welcome to Makeup Mugwump. My name is Leanne. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get ready and I'll tell you all the tea about jury duty. I'll tell you all the things as we go. I've pulled some of these things are oldies. Some of these things I just hadn't used in a while. Some of these things I'm currently using and we'll just do it together. This is the Tula Primer that I tried. It's actually quite good. It's like it feels like a moisturizer going on. Like it's like a moisturizer. I also started, it smells good too. I started using a new sunscreen today. It's a dermalogical sunscreen. So we'll see how that plays with all the things on my face today. So last video, we got ready for jury duty for the first day. So I didn't know what to expect. And some of you lovely people are so nice. And apparently I've got a good amount of lawyers who watch videos over here. Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for your kind words and your advice and your insight into your side of the table in the courtroom. Super interesting. So, I'm just going to go play by play on how it went. I'm now finished with jury duty, so I can talk about some things. There's some things I'm not necessarily going to bring up specifically because it's, you know, it's a thing. But I am free to talk about all the things now. So I showed up. We had a half day on Monday. So they actually the recording that we call the night before, and it tells us what time to show up. And it told us to show up at 12:30 on Monday, which is slightly unusual. Usually you show up in the morning. I'm working on finishing my KVD vegan Kat Von D stuff. This is the Good Apple foundation bond. This is in light 101, and I'm almost done with it. So I'm trying to scrape around the edges at this point. So I showed up at 12 o'clock so that I could, you know, be early and all that jazz. Went through a metal detector. They had one of those cool things where they x-ray your purse, you know. So I went through the metal detector to get into the building. And then was directed to go to the second floor in my courtroom, in my court building, excuse me, which is a lovely, beautiful building. And when I got up the stairs, I was shocked and a little taken aback at the number of people who were waiting there. I thought that jury duty would involve a few people. It involved upwards of 50 people. This is not my shade match, FYI. But we're going to make it work as we use the rest of this up. This is one of my favorite foundations. So I know it looks off, but we'll get it. We'll get it. Don't worry. So, wait upstairs in a vast group of people. And then when they were ready, it was even after 12:30, we were registered. So we went through into there was a room off the back of the courtroom that we went through to make sure that our address was up to date. And they had like a card for each of us, and we let them know what our telephone number was in case they needed to call us or something, you know, if court got delayed or something like that. So we made sure that our telephone numbers were up to date. And we did that, and that took 50 people. They sat us in the courtroom, which I think is a little bit unusual for distancing. They were distancing not at 6 feet apart, but 3 feet apart. I think that's a new thing in my either state or county, I'm not sure. For municipal things, you can do 3 feet apart, which was great because I don't know how they did it 6 feet apart. But we were seated in the audience of the courtroom, like there were pews, like, you know, long benches all the way across. So we were spaced out there, and we were just in random order that we walked through registration. So there was no order to that. And the two people in front of me, I think, went to school together. So they were actually talking to one another and catching up on one another's lives. So I just sat there and listened to them talk about, you know, their jobs and their kids and stuff like that. So that was fine. It made it a little less awkward to have, you know, folks who knew each other that were nearby. And after all 50 some odd, I think there was upwards of 50, so maybe 55 of us, after we were all registered and seated, they did what they called an orientation. We had a video to watch from our state on being a jury, and then the clerk, like the county clerk, gave her spiel. So she talked about kind of what we were doing and how many courts there were this week and things like that. This is an old school thing. This is the CoverGirl in Olay, Simply Ageless Foundation. And I used to use this as a concealer. And so I'm going to try it again because I haven't done it in a while. Anyway, so the clerk of court person was telling us kind of the nuts and bolts of how the week would work. In a jury pool, you were called for the week. So if you were, of course, this was Monday. So she's like, through Friday, you're going to be here unless you get placed on a jury. So that was okay. So we were going to be here all week. We do get paid for jury duty, in my state. And by paid, I mean, they give you a little bit of money. So, in my state, on the first day, you get $12, not an hour, for the whole day. And then each subsequent day, you are paid $20, again, for the day, not hourly. So she talked a little bit about that and how that works, and where to park and things like that. Like it was a general orientation. My ear itches. Okay. I didn't go very deep. Don't worry about it. So that all lasted quite a bit. And then we had a break. They showed us like where the restrooms were and where the vending machines were and things like that, so that we would know. And then we came back into court at a specific time. So what we were informed is that there were two specific cases starting on Monday. There was a Superior Court criminal case and a civil case that was starting that same day. So they needed two juries. In the criminal case, they needed 12 jurors plus alternate. And then in the civil court, if the attorneys agree, they can have less than 12. But that's only if the attorneys agree, because civil court in the United States is when a person or an entity sues another person or an entity. Criminal is the state versus a defendant for breaking criminal law. So it's a little bit different for civil than it is criminal. I'm learning as I go. So we were in the criminal courtroom, the Superior Criminal Courtroom, because it was larger than the civil courtroom. And I'll just stop here and say that the room itself, it was absolutely beautiful. It was a architecturally very interesting room to be in. And I have never been in a courtroom like that in my life, and it was just, there was lots to look at architecturally, which that was interesting to me. Just a side note. There was a balcony, and then on the main floor, and there were partitions, and they had a lot of plexiglass up for, I guess, that they installed during the pandemic. According to the clerk of court, they shut down the court for a good amount of time, several months in 2020, which makes sense. Lots of things were shut down. But they opened back up with some, because it's just, you can only imagine how backed up the judicial system would be if there were no court. You have to, that's the end result of a lot of things. And so it makes a big difference if there's no court happening for months. It's already backed up enough, in my opinion, but that makes it even worse. Just a thing. So, when we came back from our break, they began jury selection, which I have heard that phrase, with major court cases, in this court case, they're starting jury selection today. And I sort of understood what it meant, where, they would ask questions and then decide whether or not, the attorneys would decide whether or not they would accept you as a juror for the case. So again, about 55 people. They pulled those cards that they registered us. They just pulled 12 of them, the clerk did, and called those 12 people up into the jury box, which was socially distanced. So there was people sitting in front of the jury box and people sitting behind the jury box, so that it was socially distant in the box and around the box. It was an interesting thing. Of course, everybody was masked in my courtroom, except for the judge. And the attorneys, when they spoke, would take their mask down. They didn't get up and walk around. They stayed seated, and everyone had a microphone. But I think it can be very difficult to hear anyway, or to understand. I'm going to use, oh, by the way, this is the Makeup Revolution Vivid Baked Bronzer in Ready to Go. It's old school. This is the Kimchi Chic Cheeky Threesome. This is the one in Apple Bottom Cheeks. And I think I'm going to use the matte one on the left. So we got asked, so these 12 people, I was not one of those 12, got called into the jury box, and they got asked about several things. The charges that the defendant was brought in on, or was on trial for, involved drug charges and a charge of I can't remember how it was worded. The judge and the attorneys speak so quickly because they're very used to saying these things, because the judge had done it for like 30, he was like a judge for 37 years. This guy's been around the block, but I couldn't, it was like, we were hearing it for the first time. So it was a little bit hard to remember everything, but there was a charge that involved resisting arrest, and I believe assaulting the police officer, and something about stopping their general duties or something like that. So there was something else that happened. It started as a traffic stop. So there was something else that happened. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So jury selection asked several questions. Lots of people were asked. Everyone was asked about their past and opinions on drugs, and whether or not anyone in their close family, friends had been convicted of any kind of drug possession, intent to sell, things like that. So there was a lot of questions about drugs, which was interesting. It makes sense because that's what the case was about. And then we had a questionnaire that we filled out before we came in that had, lots of questions about ourselves. And so there were questions that stemmed from people's answers on their questionnaires. Both lawyers got that. So the prosecuting attorney asked a bunch of questions, dismissed some jurors because he dismissed a couple jurors. They replaced those jurors, started the process over again. And then when he was satisfied, the defense attorney asked the 12 that were sitting there questions, dismissed 5 jurors, replaced the 5, and started the process all over again. So we started court at 2, and coming up on 4 o'clock, it took a lot longer than we anticipated. And the folks around me had never served on a jury before, including me. So it was a little bit shocking to us how long that it took, and that we thought, we're almost done. And then he dismissed 5 of them. We were like, oh my goodness. So it was interesting. Just there were a lot of folks that worked in healthcare. We have a large hospital organization here. And so that was the thing that a lot of folks worked in healthcare, and then we had a drug counselor that was called in for jury duty. Folks that had law enforcement officers in their family They had questions about that. It was quite interesting, quite interesting. So anyway, learned quite a bit there. Some folks had to share some difficult things about their lives with complete strangers. And that was, if they had been, arrested on drug charges or a family member, and kind of having to share that with people was, it was fascinating to me. But it just, that was part of what you had to do. So, it was interesting. So we actually got the 12 all the way through. We had 12 of them, yes, and then they said we need an alternate juror, and everybody was like, "Oh, we have to start this whole process over again with another person." And it was 4:00 when that happened, and we were thinking, okay, we've got an hour left. We can do this. We can do this. And they called my name, and so my card was drawn. So I went up to the front and sat in the alternate juror chair. I was asked the questions by the judge that everyone was asked about whether or not I knew the witnesses on the witness list, whether or not I had drug charges or anybody in my family did, and things like that. Went very quickly. I did not know the witnesses. I have not had drug charges myself, and so that went very quickly. And then the prosecuting attorney asked if it would bother me if I would be an alternate jury and have to hear all the facts of the case, but not get a vote. If everybody, if all the jurors showed up the next day for court, then I wouldn't actually render a verdict. I wouldn't vote. And he said that bothers some people. He asked if that would bother me, and I said no, it wouldn't bother me at all. I am okay if I don't have to do this. But I sit here and I listen to all the evidence, but I don't actually have to render a verdict. That sounds ideal to me. So I said that it wouldn't bother me. He then said that he had no objections, and the defense attorney did not ask me a single question. He said he had no objections, and we were done. So I was probably the quickest person to be confirmed as a juror because they didn't have questions for me, which is great. I don't know if that's because of what was written on my questionnaire, that they were both satisfied with me, or if it's a combination of that. And as an alternate, there's a very good chance that I would never deliberate. I would never actually have an opinion or get an opinion for the verdict. And so either one or a combination of both, doesn't matter to me. At that point, they dismissed the rest of the jury pool. Even the ones who were taken off of this jury, they had to go over to the civil court and start that jury selection process, because that civil court was going to start and they needed a jury as well. Same jury pool. So criminal got first stab, and then the civil court got, I'm assuming they picked a jury. We never saw those people again. They just left. So they all left. That was very interesting. The whole process was interesting. So then they dismissed with instructions to be back the next morning. So yesterday morning, got up and went to court, and went into court about 9:30. And we started with so we thought we were going to have opening statements like they do. They both, the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney, waived the opening statement. I was like, well, okay. We didn't even get that. I thought we were going to have law and order in there, but we didn't. They waived that. So they didn't even do that. It's fascinating. And so after they waived that, we were all kind of shocked in the jury box. We're just like, oh, okay. So they called the first witness, who was a deputy sheriff, who, y'all, he looked all of 14 years old. I mean, they're young, man. These children coming out here and getting jobs. I'm getting old too. I'm getting to that stage where I'm like, are you sure you're old enough to do that? So he came to the witness stand. the prosecuting attorney was asking him questions. It was real straightforward. It was a traffic stop. And so they established why he stopped the vehicle. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And then what happened as a result, like he got the driver's license and registration and ran his plates, and then he had called for backup because the plates didn't match. In my state, you register the vehicle with the plate, and so you can't take the plates off and put it on another vehicle. That's illegal in my state, like the license plates. So the plates didn't match the car, and so he called for backup. He was a canine unit, and I'm like, oh, bring the dog into court. But the dog wasn't in court. Bring the dog in to testify. He can sit with me in the jury box. So he called for backup, and another deputy arrived, and he described the beginning of the search of the defendant and also the vehicle. And right as he began to testify about a second search of the defendant's person, there was a motion that the defense attorney called a motion to suppress what he was about to say. And so the jury was dismissed from the courtroom while they talked the law. And so that we thought would take a few minutes. It took upwards of an hour and a half. We were in that jury sequestered room for an hour and a half. So whatever it was. So the judge called us back in after an hour and a half and said he wasn't going to tell us what that was until he said, it doesn't matter what we said. Doesn't matter what happened. What I'm going to tell you is I'll tell you afterwards. If I remember to tell you, I'll tell you afterwards what happened. We had a very good judge. He'd been in the business. I really do think he said 37 years. He was an interesting guy. Real laid back, but also just, you could tell he'd been doing it for so long. It just came naturally to him. He was an interesting guy. And so after he said he'd tell us later, he said, well, it's time for our morning break in court. And I, for a second I was like, you literally brought us back in here to have a break. But the reason why he did is because nobody else in that courtroom got a break. They were in there working the whole hour and a half. We were the only ones that were sitting there doing nothing. So he had to officially, take the break, on the record or whatever. And so he dismissed us and dismissed everybody to come back after a break. And the break was supposed to be about 15 minutes long. And then it was going to be lunchtime, it seemed like. So we got a break, and we were sequestered. By the way, this is one of those dollar eyeshadow palettes from Shop Miss A from Amuse Cosmetics, and it is just beautiful. So we were sequestered, but also got to roam free. Like we weren't like locked in a room or anything like that. They were very kind, and there was vending machines and restrooms, and we could go anywhere we wanted. He said, the bailiff said, if we needed to leave the building, that just to let him know, and that he would be fine with that. And I was like, okay, cool. Do I want to do a liner? I think maybe I'll try this is an old product for me. This is the Believe Metallic Liquid Eyeliner in Dark Champagne. Let's see if it's got any juice left in it. So we were in the room. We weren't allowed to talk about the case. Some people were talking about like other things. We live in a county. It was folks from all over the county that were being called in. So it wasn't all just from my city where I live. There were folks from all over. But there's folks that have lived here all their lives. And so we have, folks that know folks and mutual friends and things like that. So folks were talking kind of like that and, asking questions about what do you do for a living and things like that. It wasn't terrible, but it was just torturous to sit there for us not knowing when we would have to go back. I think that was the part that was like, come on. So, it lasted longer than we thought in the jury sequester room. Again, like a lot longer than we thought that we would be in there. And finally the bailiff came back and said, y'all come with me. You're going to like this. And we went back into the courtroom and sat in the box. And the judge said that the defendant had entered a plea bargain, which in America, for those of you who watch outside of the United States, that means that I have a feeling that what happened is the motion to suppress the search was not successful. So there was going to be evidence about the search of his vehicle and his person, what was found there. And as a result, the defense and the defendant, instead of waiting for us, the jury, to decide whether he was guilty or not guilty, he went ahead and pled guilty at that point. You can do that in like, you can stop the court proceedings and enter a plea. So he did, and he pled guilty, and the judge went ahead and sentenced that day, like right then, like while we were in the jury sequester room, he actually had sentencing and everything. So the gentleman who was the defendant, and this is what the judge told us, had a quite a prolific history, and as a result, in the United States, or in my state anyway, the number of times that you are convicted for things make a difference for how long you are sentenced if it's a repeat offense. And he had quite a number of repeat offenses. So he was sentenced to 11 years in prison. And so he was taken into custody, and he left before we even got back. So we were in the courtroom without the defense, without the defendant. The defense attorney was still there. But that's how it ended, is that there was a plea entered and we were no longer needed. So we were adjourned from jury duty. And in the United States, or in my state anyway, sorry, we can only be called for jury duty every 2 years. So I cannot be called for jury duty in the next 2 years. So I've already served my jury time. So there you go. It ended happily ever after for us on the jury, because we spent a day and a half. So we did the, what is it called? My goodness. Jury selection on the first half day. And then yesterday we were on the jury. So ended quite well. And it was an interesting learning experience. I'm very glad to have done it. I am happy that I was selected and didn't have to go through the process again in the civil court. It's just, that's just, woo. That's a lot of sitting and waiting. It's a lot of waiting. And, so I'm glad that I was selected on the first jury. And, it was an interesting process. So happy to have the life experience. Glad that I'm done with it. But if I have to do it again, I'm much more confident now. Like, I'm much more confident about what it entails. So, to all you lovely people who said I would be fine, you were absolutely right. I was fine. But I was incredibly nervous, because when I don't know what to expect, I get nervous. If I'm not allowed to leave somewhere of my own volition, like I don't get to choose when I leave, like I can't just get up and leave the courtroom whenever I want to, that makes me nervous too. That's just a thing that I have. Part of my neuroses is not being able to leave somewhere. So anyway, I survived. It was fine. And I'm grateful that I did. So there's part of my look there. That's a good looking eye, sis. Who am I doing bottom lashes? I don't know. I did it for court and I thought it was cute. So I did it again today. Here we are. Let's do a lip. I pulled a Clarins little lip, what do they call these? A velvet lip perfector. It's like a little, it's a squishy, furry thing. I don't know how long it's been since I used this thing. This is the shade 01. Pretty sure I got this in a box. It's a beautiful nude. See? Beauty. Isn't that pretty? Lovely. There's my face. And there's my jury duty story. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I'm so happy that you joined me. I look cute. I look so cute, which is good because I got to go to work. All right, y'all, have a great day wherever you are. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. I appreciate you all so much. Have a great day.